Hello, my name is Christopher Losinski, and today I'll be speaking about teaching Python and Jinja2 in the browser, and more generally about teaching web development in the browser. You can read more at forestwiki.com, or you can log in during the class at demo.forestwiki.com, demo.forestwiki.com. So there are wonderful resources on the web for learning Python, but there's a huge difference between learning and teaching. So learning is a very solitary activity. You log into a website, you do some things. Teaching is a very interpersonal activity. The software has to not only manage the technology, but also the relationship between the teacher and multiple students. Actually, I knew a teacher, and she had this tremendous knowledge of all of her students, not only what they were thinking, but what they're emotionally, how their families were, what their problems were. And it's a very different activity than being a software developer. And of course, if you're interested in teaching, you should know about the work of Jean Piaget, a very famous Swiss psychologist. He was interested in epistemology, the study of knowledge, and how we acquire knowledge, how there's a series of different steps we go through, starting off with, well, in the mathematics case, first you have to be able to count, then add and multiply, geometry, trigonometry, moving into advanced calculus. There's a whole series of things that people have to learn one after the other. Actually, if you're working in machine learning, it's very interesting to read this stuff and just compare that with how differently computers work. But of course, I'm more of a software developer than I am an educator. And so most of these teaching Python in the browser, they work with something called Sculpt. A Sculpt is a Python interpreter implemented in JavaScript. So it runs very nicely in the browser. The heavyweight in the room is Runestone Interactive. They have wonderful course material, but they run a large Web2Py server, so they have significant hosting costs. So they have to charge. So basically, they make the software available for free, but if you want to access the content, they charge like $100 a year. Not sure if that's for a class or for a whole school. The other group that deserves a lot of credit here is Anvil. They sell a very nice web applications on both the client and the server in Python. And so they've actually been investing heavily in upgrading Sculpt. So thank you very much, Anvil. And the third piece I use is the ACE editor. ACE has this wonderful editor, syntax checking editor in the browser. It works for all kinds of content types: HTML, CSS, JavaScript, CoffeeScript, Pug, Sass, Less, JSON, just 100 other content types that are less important to the internet. And of course, they have a Sculpt. ACE has a editor for Python, but sadly it doesn't have good syntax checking. So the Forest Wiki Python syntax checker does a little bit. Okay, so what are the advantages and disadvantages of teaching Python in the browser? Well, of course, the browser doesn't run Python natively. So on the disadvantages, we get no debugger. On the advantages, you only have to do one installation. So instead of having to install it on every student's desk, you install it, I don't know, either in the school somewhere or on the teacher's computer, and then no other installations are needed. So that's really good. The other great thing about doing things in the web instead of on people's desktops, well, first of all, even if students show up in class, you want to stay more than 2 meters away from them. And furthermore, if they're working remotely, you can't monitor what they're doing on the desktop. So a web-based solution is really important. And of course, in the web, nobody has to use a shell or learn how to use a shell. It just makes the whole process of Python much more accessible. And then of course, the best thing about teaching Python in the browser, it's not JavaScript. I don't have that much against JavaScript, but Python is really clean concepts. So it makes a very good first language to teach students. Maybe later they can move to JavaScript once they have the concepts clearly in their heads. Some other deficits, well, first there's the no debugger for Python in the browser, limited libraries, and meaning not all of the Python libraries have imported to, say, Sculpt or to the browser. And then there's the ACE editor, limited editing abilities also. What you really want to be doing is teaching web development in the browser. So there you have the advantage of only one installation. You have the advantage of being able to monitor students' work. You also have the great, for example, Google Chrome debugger, all the great JavaScript libraries, all the great ACE editors are available, and you don't have to mess with a shell. So I'm a very strong proponent of web development in the browser. In fact, I do all of my web development in the browser. So the first thing we'll be working with today is turtle graphics. I can consider this is really simple technology. You can draw lines, turn, shapes, pen up, pen down, background. We'll start off with little lines, maybe a square, starting to fill shapes. Eventually, probably by the end of this course, you'll be able to make simple drawings like a house. But the magic of turtle graphics is not the software API, it's what you can build with it. So you can do these wonderful artistic designs. And you know, if you're a student and you see this stuff and you actually see it drawing, it's very motivating. It's really quite exciting. Fractals, really lovely, lovely stuff. So I hope that this motivates everybody in the class to be a turtle graphics developer. And of course, not just abstract art, but you can do drawings too. Very nice, rising sun. So emotion, maybe Piaget talked a lot about the theory of learning. I don't know if you talked much about the emotions, but turtle graphics has a huge impact on emotions. And of course, there are a bunch of very simple turtle commands. You can tell the turtle to go right, forward, left, or backwards in the left column, in the middle column. You can tell it to draw a circle or a dot. A dot has solid color inside. You can set the background color. You can tell it to go home, the middle of the screen. You can tell it to go to a particular position. You can set a pen color or a fill color. So lots of simple turtle commands. You can do an awful lot. It's fill a shape. So basically you have a begin fill and an end fill. You tell the turtle to, and then you tell it to move in the middle, and then the shape gets filled. Of course, there's an awful lot more you can do with the turtle control. In today's exercises, we will actually, one of the exercises will be to go to the documentation and find some interesting command and create a simple problem for your students. We'll split off into pairs, so everybody will get one student and one teacher, and then we'll rotate. So you can practice being the teacher. We'll also work on Jinja some. Jinja is really quite simple. I almost feel I don't have to explain this. Okay, so the first and last line are some HTML to first, second, third. In the second line and second to last, you're iterating. In the third line, you're setting the user URL. In the fourth line, you're setting the username. Really quite simple stuff. There's a lot more features about Jinja, but the focus is not to teach you Jinja, but how to use these tools to teach people. And of course, there's not just for teaching. I actually use these tools for developing greenmaps.world. It's a map of the United States Green Party, national, state party maps. It actually includes 56 websites for candidates, local parties, multiple different versions of the web maps for Medicare for All, Green New Deal, ranked choice voting, LGBTQ, lots of subdomains. So you can do an awful lot with these kinds of tools. How do they work? Well, I'm sure everybody here is familiar with relational databases and how Django maps object models to relational databases. I'm running on an object graph database. So to first approximation, it just looks like a tree of objects. Really, it's a graph, but 95% of the time, people just see the tree. So you can think of it as a file system. And you can imagine that you have user folders. So we have a user folder, some branch of this tree, and it's got user 1 and user 2 and user 3. And you have the security problem, right? Because you don't want user 3 accessing everybody else's information. So you want to prevent user 3 for navigating the parent pointers to access the other people's folders. And so Jinja2 does this really nicely. We'll let you do an exercise on this. It's like, no, 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 you're not allowed to do that. You're a bad student. So let me speak a little bit more about this object database stuff. It's very, very different from a file system. So in a file system, files can't have children, whereas in object databases, they can. So here we have an image, the forestwiki.com. You can logo. You can go to /logo and you can see it, but it can actually have children. So we have 4 different children, /logo 50 wide, /logo 100 wide, /logo 150 wide, /logo 200 wide. So much like a file system, you traverse to the image. And what's really nice, I'm not a graphics artist. I don't know how wide these things should be. And I've got hundreds of images. Maybe I need to change their width and recalculate them all, forget it. So what it does is if it needs access to a particular image, if it isn't there, it just uses the Python pill library, generates the image, caches it in the object database. Really sweet, simplifies my life hugely. Working on an object database, very pleasant. So in a minute, we're going to do the turtle exercises. But before I do that, you can actually go to demo.forestwiki.com and log in while I'm speaking. We're also, after that, we're going to do some Jinja exercises. But before I switch, I'll just do one more slide. Another tool here, there are a lot of tools here, but one is Pug. This is one of my favorite tools. So HTML gets very complicated. And particularly when you're doing bootstrap menus, the HTML gets completely unmanageable. So I use something called Pug. What it does, it's the leading templating engine in the Node community, but I'm using it in the Python world, really in the browser. It uses indentation to define structure. So on the right, you have HTML. On the left, you can see the Pug. Basically, what you do is you throw away the opening bracket, you throw away the closing tag and use indentation. You see the Pug on the left, the HTML on the right. Should be pretty transparent. Really simple technology, very obvious technology. I'm amazed that more people don't use it. And actually, the ForceWiki has one of the best Pug editors, probably the best Pug editor in the browser I know of. Okay, so let us switch to the tutorial part of the class. I'm going to ask the meeting Zoom coordinator to split people up into pairs of 2. We'll do some work as a group, then we'll split up into pairs of 2 in breakout rooms, and then we'll come back into the group room again. Thank you very much.